The morning light filtered through the cream-colored curtains of the bridal suite at the Willowbrook estate, casting a golden glow across the room where Sarah Mitchell was about to become Sarah Hamilton. At 28, she had always imagined this day would feel different somehow, more magical, more transformative. Instead, she felt a strange hollowness in her chest as she stared at her reflection in the ornate mirror. "You look absolutely radiant," her mother Patricia whispered, as she fastened the pearl necklace that had been worn by 3 generations of Mitchell women on their wedding days. "Your grandmother would have been so proud." Sarah touched the delicate pearls, feeling their cool smoothness against her skin. The wedding dress, a creation of silk and French lace that had taken 8 months to design and craft, fit her perfectly. Every detail had been meticulously planned over the past year and a half. The flowers were white peonies and garden roses, exactly as she had dreamed since she was 12. The venue was the same estate where she had attended her cousin's wedding 5 years ago, and fallen in love with its sprawling gardens and vintage charm. "I can't believe David and I are actually doing this," Sarah murmured, adjusting the cathedral-length veil that flowed behind her like a river of silk. "Sometimes I feel like I'm watching someone else's life." Her younger sister Emma, serving as maid of honor, looked up from arranging the train of Sarah's dress. "That's just wedding day nerves. David adores you. I've never seen a man look at a woman the way he looks at you. You two are perfect together." Sarah wanted to feel that certainty, that absolute conviction that Emma spoke with such confidence. David Hamilton was everything any woman could want in a husband. At 31, he was a successful architect with his own firm, designing custom homes for wealthy clients throughout the state. He was handsome in that classic, reliable way that mothers loved and other women envied. He brought her coffee in bed every Sunday morning, remembered important dates, and had proposed to her on the beach in Maui during a sunset that painted the sky in shades of pink and gold. But lately, something had felt different between them. David seemed distracted, often checking his phone during dinner and taking calls that he claimed were work-related but required him to step outside for privacy. When she asked about it, he would smile that charming smile and tell her she was being silly, that he was just stressed about a big project deadline that would be finished after the honeymoon. "Sarah, honey, we need to get moving," her mother said, glancing at her watch. "The photographer wants to start with the getting ready shots in 15 minutes. And then we have the first look session with David at 11. The getting ready photos felt like a performance." Sarah smiled on cue, laughed when the photographer asked her to look surprised at her reflection, and pretended to be overjoyed when her bridesmaid surprised her with mimosas. The photographer, an energetic woman named Jessica who specialized in wedding photography, had an endless supply of directions. "Now look over your shoulder at me, but keep your eyes soft and dreamy. Think about how much you love David. Perfect. Now let's get a shot of you putting on your shoes. Emma, can you help with the dress? Beautiful. Sarah, you're a natural at this." But even as Sarah posed and smiled, a nagging feeling continued to grow in the pit of her stomach. It was the same feeling she had experienced 3 weeks ago when she had stopped by David's office to surprise him with lunch and found it empty. Even though his assistant had told her he was in meetings all day, when she asked David about it later, he explained that he had been at a client site visit that ran longer than expected. The bridesmaids bustled around the room, fixing each other's makeup and adjusting their dusty rose-colored dresses. Sarah had chosen her closest friends to stand beside her on this day. Emma, of course, her sister and best friend since childhood. Rachel, her college roommate who had introduced her to David at a party 3 years ago. And Jennifer, her closest friend from work who had become like a sister to her. But there was someone notably absent from the bridal party. Someone who should have been there but had bowed out. Just 2 months before the wedding, with a vague explanation about family obligations. Melissa Torres had been Sarah's best friend since they were 14 years old. They had met in high school during a particularly awkward phase of adolescence, when both girls felt like outsiders trying to navigate the social complexities of teenage life. Melissa was the one who had held Sarah's hair back when she was sick with food poisoning during their senior trip. She was the one who had driven Sarah to the emergency room when she broke her wrist falling off her bike in college. She was the one who had helped Sarah pick out the perfect dress for her first date with David, and who had been the first person Sarah called when David proposed. So when Melissa suddenly announced that she wouldn't be able to be in the wedding, citing her brother's unexpected deployment and her need to help with his children, Sarah had been devastated. It felt wrong to be getting married without Melissa there, but Melissa had insisted that she understood and that Sarah should have the perfect day she deserved. "I wish Melissa could be here," Sarah said quietly as Emma helped her into her shoes. "It doesn't feel right without her." Emma's expression flickered with something Sarah couldn't quite identify. "Well, she'll be at the ceremony at least. That's what matters, right?" Sarah nodded, but the sadness remained. She had called Melissa the night before, hoping to hear her friend's voice and maybe get some reassurance about the strange feelings she had been having about the wedding. But Melissa's phone had gone straight to voicemail, and she hadn't called back. At 10:30, the bridal party made their way downstairs to the estate's main floor for the first look session. The plan was for David to wait in the garden while Sarah approached from behind, tapping him on the shoulder so he could turn around and see her in her wedding dress for the first time. It was supposed to be an intimate moment before the chaos of the ceremony, a chance for them to connect privately and share their excitement about the day. Jessica positioned David with his back to the garden path, his hands clasped behind him as he waited. He looked handsome in his charcoal gray tuxedo, his dark hair perfectly styled, his broad shoulders filling out the jacket that had been tailored specifically for him. Sarah's heart should have been racing with anticipation, but instead she felt strangely detached, as if she were watching the scene unfold from somewhere outside her body. "Okay, Sarah. Start walking toward him slowly," Jessica called out, her camera already clicking away. "David, remember, don't turn around until you feel her tap your shoulder. This is going to be such a beautiful moment." Sarah began the walk across the garden, her heels clicking softly on the stone pathway. The morning air was crisp and clean, carrying the scent of jasmine and fresh-cut grass. She could hear the distant sounds of the catering staff setting up tables and the florist making final adjustments to the altar arrangements. When she reached David, she gently placed her hand on his shoulder. He turned around, and for a moment, his face was completely blank, as if he were seeing a stranger. Then his expression shifted into a smile that seemed somehow forced, artificial. "You look beautiful," he said, but his voice lacked the emotion she had expected. She had imagined that this moment would move him to tears, that he would be overwhelmed by the reality of what they were about to do. Instead, he seemed distant, distracted. "Thank you," Sarah replied, suddenly feeling shy in front of the man she was about to marry. "You look very handsome." They embraced for the camera, but Sarah could feel the tension in David's body. His hug felt perfunctory, like something he was doing because it was expected rather than because he wanted to hold her. When they pulled apart, she searched his eyes for some sign of the love and excitement she desperately wanted to see, but found only a kind of polite affection that felt more appropriate for distant relatives than for two people about to pledge their lives to each other. "How are you feeling?" she asked, hoping he would open up to her about whatever was bothering him. Good. Just a little nervous, I guess. Big day and all that." David's smile never reached his eyes. "You know how it is." But Sarah didn't know how it was, because she had never felt so disconnected from someone she was supposed to love more than anyone else in the world. She wanted to ask him what was wrong, wanted to demand honesty about why he seemed so reluctant to be there. But Jessica was orchestrating their every move, and there was no opportunity for a real conversation. After 30 minutes of posed photos and forced smiles, the first look session was over, and David returned to the groom's quarters to wait with his groomsmen while Sarah went back upstairs to prepare for the ceremony. The wedding was scheduled to begin at 2 o'clock, and guests were already starting to arrive. "How did it go?" Emma asked as soon as Sarah walked back into the bridal suite. "Fine," Sarah lied, because she didn't know how to explain the hollow feeling that had settled in her chest. He looked happy, but even as she said the words, Sarah knew they weren't true. David had looked many things during their first look session, but happy wasn't one of them. He had looked like a man going through the motions, fulfilling an obligation, rather than celebrating the most important day of his life. As the afternoon approached, the energy in the bridal suite intensified. The makeup artist touched up everyone's lipstick and powder, the hairstylist made final adjustments to curls and updos, and the photographer captured every moment of preparation. Sarah found herself moving through the activities like an actress playing a role, smiling when expected, laughing at the appropriate moments, but feeling increasingly disconnected from the reality of what was happening at 1:30, with just 30 minutes before the ceremony was scheduled to begin. Sarah realized that she had left her phone in David's car the night before. She had wanted to check for any last-minute messages from out-of-town relatives or friends who might be running late. "I need to grab my phone from David's car," she told Emma. "Can you help me get downstairs without anyone seeing me? I don't want David to see me before the ceremony." Emma looked uncertain. "Isn't it bad luck or something? Can't it wait until after? I just want to check if my Aunt Margaret made it in from Phoenix. She wasn't sure if her flight would be delayed." "Please, it will just take 2 minutes." Reluctantly, Emma helped Sarah navigate the back staircase that led to the service entrance of the estate. David's black BMW was parked in the far corner of the lot, away from the main guest parking area. Sarah had remembered that he always kept a spare key in a magnetic holder under the rear bumper for emergencies. As they approached the car, Sarah could see that there was already someone inside. Through the tinted rear window, she could make out 2 figures in what appeared to be an intimate embrace. Her first thought was that someone had mistaken David's car for their own, or that a guest was having some kind of emergency. "Should we come back later?" Emma whispered, grabbing Sarah's arm. But something about the situation felt wrong to Sarah, and she found herself moving closer to the car despite Emma's attempts to pull her away. As she got nearer, she could see more clearly through the windshield, and what she saw made her blood run cold. The man in the driver's seat was wearing a charcoal gray tuxedo, identical to the one David had been wearing during their first look session. His dark hair was slightly mussed, as if someone had been running their fingers through it, and the woman in the passenger seat, her dusty rose-colored bridesmaid dress hiked up around her thighs, was someone Sarah would have recognized anywhere. Melissa Torres, Sarah's best friend since high school, was kissing David Hamilton. Sarah's fiancé, with a passion and intensity that made it clear this was not their first time together. Sarah felt like she had been punched in the stomach. The world around her seemed to tilt and blur, and for a moment she thought she might actually faint. Emma's grip on her arm tightened, and she heard her sister's sharp intake of breath as she too realized what they were witnessing. "Sarah, we need to go," Emma whispered urgently. "We need to get out of here right now." But Sarah couldn't move. She stood frozen, watching as the two people she trusted most in the world continued their betrayal just 30 yards away, from where their wedding guests were gathering to celebrate what they believed was the beginning of Sarah and David's life together. The details of what she was seeing burned themselves into her memory with cruel clarity. The way Melissa's hand was tangled in David's hair, the way his hand was pressed against the small of her back, holding her close, the way they moved together, with the familiarity of lovers who had done this many times before. And then, as if the universe wanted to ensure that Sarah's humiliation was complete, David pulled away from Melissa and looked directly toward where Sarah was standing. For a moment, their eyes met through the windshield of his car, and Sarah saw recognition and panic flash across his face. "Oh God," Emma breathed. "He saw you." Sarah watched as David said something to Melissa, who immediately turned to look in their direction. Even from a distance, Sarah could see the shock and guilt on her best friend's face. Melissa's mouth formed what looked like Sarah's name, but no sound reached them across the parking lot. "We have to go," Emma said, more forcefully this time. "Sarah, we have to go right now." Finally, Sarah's paralysis broke, and she turned and ran. She ran as fast as her wedding dress would allow, her cathedral veil streaming behind her like a banner of surrender. Emma ran beside her, holding up the train of her dress to keep it from dragging on the ground. They made it back to the bridal suite, just as Sarah's composure completely collapsed. She stumbled through the door and immediately began hyperventilating, her carefully applied makeup streaking down her face as tears poured from her eyes. "What happened?" Rachel demanded, rushing to Sarah's side. "What's wrong?" "I can't," Sarah gasped between sobs. "I can't do this. I can't marry him." The room erupted in chaos. Patricia demanded to know what was happening. Jennifer tried to fix Sarah's makeup while simultaneously asking Emma for explanations. The photographer continued taking pictures, apparently thinking this was some kind of emotional pre-ceremony moment that would make for compelling wedding album material. "Everyone out," Emma said firmly. "Everyone except family needs to leave right now." It took several minutes to clear the room of the photographer, makeup artist, and hairstylist, all of whom were confused and concerned about the dramatic change in atmosphere. Finally, it was just Sarah, Emma, and their mother in the bridal suite. "Sarah, sweetheart, you need to tell us what happened," Patricia said, sitting beside her daughter on the velvet-holstered bench. "Whatever it is, we can fix it. Pre-wedding jitters are completely normal." "It's not jitters, Mom," Sarah said through her tears. "David is cheating on me with Melissa. I just saw them together in his car." The silence that followed was deafening. Patricia's face went pale, and Emma sank into a nearby chair as if her legs could no longer support her. "Are you absolutely certain?" Patricia asked carefully. "Sometimes things can look different than they actually are, especially when we're stressed and emotional." "They were kissing, Mom. This wasn't some innocent conversation or a friendly hug. They were all over each other. And when David saw me watching, the look on his face..." Sarah's voice trailed off as a fresh wave of sobs overtook her. Emma stood up abruptly and began pacing the room. "I should have told you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I should have said something weeks ago when I first suspected." Sarah looked up at her sister with red, swollen eyes. "What do you mean, when you first suspected?" "I saw them together at the rehearsal dinner venue when we went for the final walkthrough last month. They were in the corner of the restaurant, and something about the way they were talking seemed too intimate. But I told myself I was imagining things because I didn't want to believe that Melissa would do that to you." "Why didn't you tell me?" Sarah asked, her voice breaking. "Because I wasn't sure, and because I didn't want to ruin your happiness if I was wrong, and because I hoped that even if something had happened between them, it would end before the wedding." Emma's own eyes were now filled with tears. "I'm so sorry, Sarah. I should have protected you." Patricia stood up and smoothed down her navy blue Mother Ruva bride dress. "Well, we need to figure out what we're going to do now. There are 200 people downstairs expecting a wedding ceremony to begin in 15 minutes. The reality of the situation began to sink in for Sarah. Not only had her fiancé betrayed her with her best friend, but they had done it on her wedding day, in front of all their family and friends. The humiliation was almost as devastating as the betrayal itself. "I can't face all those people," Sarah said. "I can't walk down that aisle knowing what I know." "You don't have to do anything you don't want to do," Emma said firmly. "This is your choice, and whatever you decide, we'll support you." But before Sarah could respond, there was a soft knock on the door, followed by David's voice calling her name. "Sarah, can we talk, please?" The three women looked at each other. Patricia's expression was one of barely controlled rage, while Emma looked like she wanted to physically attack the man on the other side of the door. "Go away, David," Emma called out. "She doesn't want to see you." "Sarah, I know you're upset, but this isn't what it looks like. Let me explain, please." Sarah felt a surge of anger that temporarily overpowered her grief. How dare he try to gaslight her after what she had witnessed with her own eyes? How dare he attempt to minimize or explain away his betrayal? She stood up, wiped her eyes, and walked to the door. What exactly isn't what it looks like, David? She called through the wooden barrier. Because what it looked like was you making out with my best friend in your car 30 minutes before our wedding ceremony. There was a long pause before David responded. I know how it must have seemed, but Melissa and I were just saying goodbye. She's been going through a difficult time, and she needed someone to talk to. Saying goodbye by sticking your tongue down her throat. Sarah's voice was rising with each word. Do you think I'm completely stupid? Sarah, please open the door, we can work this out. Don't throw away everything we have together because of a misunderstanding. Emma stepped forward and put her hand on the door handle. If you don't leave right now, I'm calling security. Sarah doesn't want to talk to you. This is between Sarah and me, David said, his voice taking on a harder edge. You don't speak for her. Actually, she does, Sarah said, surprised by the strength in her own voice. Emma speaks for me because I can't trust anything you say anymore. How long has this been going on with Melissa? Another long pause. Sarah, you're being emotional and irrational. Why don't you take a few minutes to calm down, and then we can discuss this like adults? The condescending tone in David's voice was the final straw for Sarah. Any lingering doubt about what she had witnessed, any small hope that there might be an innocent explanation, evaporated completely. Get away from this door. David, the wedding is off. I never want to see you again. You don't mean that. You're just upset. Think about all the money your parents have spent on this wedding. Think about all our guests who traveled here to celebrate with us. Think about our future together, our plans to buy a house and start a family. I'm thinking about the fact that my fiancé is a cheating liar who was apparently screwing my best friend while I was planning our wedding. Sarah shot back. Now get out of here before I have you thrown out. Finally, they heard David's footsteps retreating down the hallway. Sarah collapsed back onto the bench, emotionally drained from the confrontation. I'm proud of you, Patricia said quietly. That took a lot of strength. I don't feel strong, Sarah replied. I feel like my entire life has just fallen apart, and it was true. The future she had been building in her mind for the past 3 years had just crumbled to dust. The house in the suburbs with the white picket fence and the golden retriever, the children they had talked about having, 2 or maybe 3 if they were lucky, the vacations they had planned to take, the anniversaries they would celebrate, the life they were supposed to build together, it was all gone, destroyed by 30 seconds of witnessing an betrayal that had probably been going on for much longer than she could bear to think about. What do I do now? Sarah asked, looking back and forth between her mother and sister. How do I face all those people downstairs? You don't have to, Emma said. We can handle the guests. You just focus on taking care of yourself. But what do I tell them? What explanation do I give for why there's no wedding? Patricia stood up and straightened her shoulders, transforming from concerned mother into the take-charge woman who had run a successful real estate business for 20 years. You don't owe anyone an explanation except the one you're comfortable giving. Emma and I will go downstairs and make an announcement that the wedding has been postponed due to unforeseen circumstances. We'll thank everyone for coming and let them know that dinner will still be served. Most people will be understanding and respectful. And what about David and Melissa? What about them? Emma said fiercely. They can deal with the consequences of their actions. This isn't your responsibility to manage. But even as her family rallied around her, Sarah couldn't stop thinking about all the questions that were now flooding her mind. How long had David and Melissa been having an affair? Had it started before David proposed to her? Had they been laughing about her behind her back while she excitedly planned their wedding? Had every conversation she'd had with Melissa about David been a lie? She thought about all the times over the past few months when Melissa had seemed distracted or uncomfortable when Sarah talked about wedding plans. She had attributed it to stress about her brother's deployment, but now she wondered if it was actually guilt about betraying her best friend. She thought about the night 3 weeks ago, when David had claimed to be working late but his office had been empty. Had he been with Melissa? How many other lies had he told her? How many other times had she accepted his explanations without question because she trusted him completely? I need to get out of this dress, Sarah said suddenly. The beautiful gown that had made her feel like a princess that morning now felt like a costume for a role she no longer wanted to play. Emma and Patricia helped her out of the intricate lacework and silk, carefully hanging the dress in the garment bag that would take it home unworn to what was supposed to be her marital bedroom. Sarah put on the simple blue sundress she had worn to the venue that morning, feeling more like herself in the casual clothes. As her mother and sister prepared to go downstairs and face the assembled wedding guests, Sarah made a decision that surprised even herself. I want to talk to Melissa, she said. Sarah, I don't think that's a good idea right now, Emma said gently. You're still processing what happened. Maybe it would be better to wait until you've had some time to think about what you want to say. No, Sarah said firmly. I need to hear it from her. I need to understand how she could do this to me. Patricia looked concerned. Are you sure you're ready for that conversation? It might be more painful than helpful right now. Mom, my best friend betrayed me in the worst possible way. Not talking to her isn't going to make it hurt less. At least if I confront her, I'll have some answers. Reluctantly, Emma agreed to find Melissa and ask her to come to the bridal suite. Sarah waited alone for 10 minutes, staring out the window at the garden where she was supposed to have been exchanging vows with David at that very moment. When Melissa finally appeared in the doorway, she looked like a different person than the confident, vibrant woman Sarah had known for 14 years. Her face was pale and streaked with tears, her hair disheveled and her bridesmaid dress wrinkled and stained with what looked like makeup. "Sarah, I am so sorry," Melissa said, before she had even fully entered the room. "I know you probably hate me right now, and I don't blame you, but please let me explain." "Explain," Sarah repeated incredulously. "What possible explanation could there be for what I saw?" Melissa closed the door behind her and leaned against it, as if she needed the support to remain standing. "It started 6 months ago, completely by accident. I ran into David at the coffee shop near my office, and we started talking about the wedding planning and how stressed you both were. He said he was having second thoughts about getting married so young, and I told him that was normal. So you decided to help him work through his doubts by sleeping with him." "No, it wasn't like that. We just kept running into each other, and he kept wanting to talk about his feelings about the marriage. I thought I was being a good friend too, both of you, by helping him process his concerns." Sarah felt her anger building with each word. "By fucking him behind my back." Melissa flinched at the crude language. "It wasn't supposed to happen. We were just talking one evening when you were working late, and he kissed me. I should have stopped it right then, but ... double quotes, but you didn't." "No, I didn't. And then it happened again, and before I knew it, we were having an affair." Melissa's voice broke as she continued. "I tried to end it so many times. Sarah, I knew it was wrong, and I knew it would destroy our friendship if you found out. But David kept saying that he thought he was in love with me, and that maybe we were meant to be together." The words hit Sarah like physical blows. Not only had her fiancé betrayed her, but he had told her best friend that he loved her. While Sarah was picking out flowers and planning seating charts, David was professing his love to another woman. "So, why didn't he call off the wedding?" Sarah asked, her voice deadly quiet. "Because he said he wasn't sure what he wanted. He said he loved me, but he also cared about you, and he didn't want to hurt you or embarrass you by canceling the wedding." "At the last minute. How thoughtful of him," Sarah said sarcastically. "So instead he decided to string both of us along and see what happened." "Sarah, I know how this sounds, but David is confused. He's been under so much pressure with the wedding planning and starting his new business, and I think he just got caught up in something that felt exciting and different." "Are you actually defending him right now?" Sarah could hardly believe what she was hearing. "Are you seriously trying to justify what you both did to me?" "No, I'm not defending anyone. What we did was unforgivable. I'm just trying to help you understand that it wasn't some calculated plan to hurt you. But it did hurt me, Melissa. It destroyed me. You were supposed to be my best friend. You were supposed to be the one person I could trust with anything, and instead, you stabbed me. In the back in the worst possible way." Melissa began crying harder. "I know I hate myself for what I've done to you. I've ruined the most important friendship of my life, and I've hurt the person I care about most in the world. If you cared about me, you never would have done this in the first place," Sarah said coldly. "If you cared about me, you would have told me the truth months ago instead of letting me plan a wedding to a man who was in love with someone else. I wanted to tell you, but David begged me not to. He said he was going to end things with me after the wedding and be a good husband to you, and you believed him. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that we could all somehow get through this without anyone getting hurt." Sarah laughed bitterly. "Well, that worked out really well, didn't it?" The two women stood in silence for several minutes, the weight of 14 years of friendship hanging between them like a funeral shroud. "Is there any chance you could ever forgive me?" Melissa asked quietly. Sarah looked at the woman who had been her closest friend for half her life, the woman who had shared her secrets and dreams, who had been there for every major moment of her adult life. She tried to find some spark of the love and affection she had always felt for Melissa, but all she could feel was a deep, aching emptiness. "I don't know," Sarah said honestly. "Right now I can't even look at you without feeling sick to my stomach. Maybe someday I'll be able to understand how you could do this to me, but today is not that day." Melissa nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I'll leave you alone. But Sarah, please know that I never meant for any of this to happen. You deserved so much better from both of us." After Melissa left, Sarah sat alone in the bridal suite, listening to the sounds of her wedding reception happening without her. In the gardens below, she could hear music playing and people laughing, and she wondered what her mother and sister had told the guests about why there was no bride and groom present. A knock on the door interrupted her thoughts, and her father's voice called softly from the hallway. "Sarah, can I come in?" Robert Mitchell had always been a man of few words, preferring to show his love through actions rather than elaborate speeches. But when he walked into the room and saw his daughter sitting alone in her sundress, her wedding dress hanging like a ghost in the corner, his usually stoic composure cracked. "Oh, sweetheart," he said, gathering her into a hug that smelled like his cologne and the spearmint gum he always chewed. "I'm so sorry this happened to you. Did Mom tell you what happened?" "She told me enough. That boy and your friend made a terrible mistake, and you're paying the price for their poor choices." Sarah pulled back to look at her father's face. "What did you say to the guests?" "Your mother handled most of it. She told them that you and David had realized you weren't ready for marriage and had decided to postpone the ceremony. She thanked everyone for coming and invited them to stay for dinner if they wanted to." "How did people react?" "Most folks were understanding. A few of the older relatives were shocked, but your cousin Jenny stood up and said that you were brave for being honest about your feelings instead of going through with something that didn't feel right." Sarah felt a rush of gratitude for her family's support. "What about David? Is he still here?" "He left about 20 minutes ago, packed up his groomsmen and drove off without saying a word to anyone." The fact that David had simply left without attempting to make amends or take responsibility for the situation somehow made Sarah feel even more betrayed. After 3 years together, after planning a life and a future, he had simply walked away when confronted with the consequences of his actions. "I keep thinking about all the signs I must have missed," Sarah said. "All the times he was distant or secretive, all the excuses he made for working late or having to travel for business. I feel so stupid for trusting him." "You're not stupid, Sarah, you're trusting and loving, and those are good qualities. The fact that David took advantage of your trust says something about his character, not yours." "But what if I'm a terrible judge of character? What if I can never trust my instincts about people again?" Robert sat down beside his daughter and took her hands in his. "One person's betrayal doesn't mean you should stop believing in goodness and honesty. There are still trustworthy people in the world, people who would never hurt you the way David and Melissa did. Right now it feels like I'll never be able to trust anyone again. That feeling will pass, sweetheart. It's going to take time, but you'll heal from this. And when you do, you'll be stronger and wiser than you were before." As the afternoon turned to evening, various family members and close friends came by the bridal suite to check on Sarah and offer their support. Her grandmother, who was 83 and had been married to Sarah's grandfather for 61 years before his death, sat with her for a long time without saying much of anything. "I know it doesn't feel like it now," she finally said, "but this is probably the best thing that could have happened to you. Better to find out what kind of man he really is now than after you're legally bound to him." Her college roommate Rachel, who had been one of the bridesmaids, was less philosophical and more furious. "I never liked David," she declared. "I always thought he was too smooth, too charming. Men who are that good at saying all the right things usually have something to hide." "Why didn't you ever say anything?" Sarah asked. "Because you seemed happy with him, and I thought maybe I was just being paranoid. I've always been suspicious of people who seem too perfect." As the sun began to set over the estate grounds, Sarah realized that she needed to make some practical decisions about her immediate future. She had been planning to spend her wedding night at the luxury hotel downtown before flying to Italy for a 2-week honeymoon. Obviously those plans were no longer relevant. "I think I want to go home," she told Emma. "I want to go to my apartment and be alone for a while." "Are you sure? You could stay with Mom and Dad or with me and Jake. You shouldn't have to be by yourself right now." "Actually, I think being alone is exactly what I need. I need time to process everything that's happened without having to worry about how other people are feeling or what they need from me." Emma looked uncertain, but she respected her sister's wishes together. They gathered Sarah's belongings and loaded them into Emma's car. The wedding dress would go to their parents' house for now, along with all the gifts that would need to be returned and the flowers that would wilt without being carried down an aisle. As they drove through the early evening traffic toward Sarah's apartment, she found herself thinking about practical matters for the first time since the morning's discovery. She would need to cancel the honeymoon flights and try to get refunds on the hotel reservations. She would need to return wedding gifts and write thank you notes to guests who had traveled long distances to attend a ceremony that never happened. Most urgently, she would need to figure out what to do about the apartment lease she shared with David. They had been living together for 18 months, and their names were both on the lease that didn't expire for another 6 months. The thought of continuing to share a living space with him was unbearable, but she also couldn't afford the rent on her teacher's salary without his architect's income. "I'll help you figure out the apartment situation," Emma said, as if reading her thoughts. "We'll talk to a lawyer if we need to. David created this mess so he can deal with the financial consequences." When they arrived at the apartment building, Sarah felt a moment of panic at the thought of going inside and seeing all the remnants of the life she had been building with David. Their shared furniture, their shared photographs, their shared plans for the future that would now need to be dismantled piece by piece. But as Emma helped her carry her bags upstairs, Sarah realized that being back in familiar surroundings actually felt comforting rather than painful. This had been her home before David moved in, and it could be her home again after he moved. "Are you sure you don't want me to stay?" Emma asked as they stood in the doorway. "I'm sure. I need some time to think about everything that's happened and figure out what I want to do next." After Emma left, Sarah changed into comfortable pajamas and made herself a cup of tea. She sat on the couch she had bought herself 2 years ago and tried to process the events of the day. In less than 12 hours, her entire life had been turned upside down. The man she had planned to marry had betrayed her with the woman she had trusted most in the world. The future she had been building in her mind had evaporated like morning mist. But as she sat in the quiet apartment, Sarah realized that along with the pain and betrayal, she felt something else: relief. The doubts and uncertainties she had when experiencing about the wedding, the nagging feeling that something wasn't right between her and David, the sense that she was going through the motions rather than celebrating the love of her life, it all made sense now. Some part of her had known that David wasn't fully committed to their relationship, even if she hadn't been able to consciously acknowledge it. Some instinct had been warning her that the man she was about to marry wasn't the person she thought he was. Her phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. The caller ID showed David's name, and for a moment she considered answering. Part of her wanted to hear what he had to say, wanted to understand how he could have done what he did, but then she remembered the condescending tone he had used when trying to talk to her through the bridal suite door. The way he had tried to minimize and explain away his betrayal. She let the call go to voicemail. A few minutes later, her phone buzzed with a text message also from David. "Sarah, please call me. We need to talk about this situation like adults. I know you're hurt, but we can work through this if you give me a chance to explain." The message made her angry all over again. Even now, hours after being caught in the act of betraying her, David was still trying to control the narrative. He was still treating her like she was being irrational and emotional, like she was the one who needed to be reasonable and understanding. She deleted the message without responding and turned off her phone. As the night wore on, Sarah found herself thinking not just about the betrayal, but about the relationship itself. She realized that there had been warning signs for months, maybe even years, that she had chosen to ignore because she was so invested in the idea of getting married and starting the next chapter of her life. David had always been charming and attentive in public, but in private he could be dismissive and controlling. He made decisions about their social plans without consulting her, assuming she would go along with whatever he wanted. He had strong opinions about how she should dress, what she should eat, even what books she should read. She had attributed these behaviors to a strong personality and leadership qualities, telling herself that it was good to be with someone who knew what he wanted and wasn't afraid to take charge. But now she wondered if what she had interpreted as confidence was actually selfishness and manipulation. The affair with Melissa was just the most dramatic example of David's willingness to prioritize his own desires over Sarah's feelings and well-being. He had been emotionally unavailable and dishonest for months, but he had expected her to continue planning their wedding and building their future together as if nothing was wrong. As painful as it was to confront these realizations, Sarah found that understanding the truth about her relationship helped ease some of the self-blame she had been feeling. She hadn't been stupid or naive to trust David and Melissa. She had but a loving, committed partner who deserved honesty and loyalty in return. The fact that she hadn't received those things said nothing about her worth as a person and everything about their character flaws. Around midnight, Sarah made herself a simple dinner and sat down to think about what she wanted to do next. The immediate practical concerns would need to be addressed in the coming days: canceling vendors, returning gifts, figuring out the living situation, and dealing with the social awkwardness of explaining to friends and extended family why her marriage that had ended before it began. But beyond those logistics, she had an opportunity to rebuild her life according to her own values and priorities. She could figure out what she actually wanted, rather than what she thought she was supposed to want. For the first time in years, she was accountable only to herself. The realization was both terrifying and exhilarating. She had spent so much energy over the past 3 years trying to be the kind of girlfriend and fiancée that David wanted, adjusting her own preferences and opinions to match his, that she had almost forgotten what her own authentic voice sounded like. Now she could rediscover that voice. She could figure out what kind of life would actually make her happy, rather than what kind of life looked good from the outside. As she prepared for bed in the early hours of the morning, Sarah felt something she hadn't expected: hope. The betrayal had been devastating and the healing process would be long and difficult. But for the first time in months, she felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be, doing exactly what she was supposed to be doing. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and difficult conversations. There would be tears and anger and moments of crushing loneliness. But there would also be opportunities for growth, for self-discovery, and eventually, for building something better than what she had lost. Sarah turned off the lights and settled into bed, grateful for the silence and solitude that allowed her to begin processing the most difficult day of her life. Outside her window, the city lights twinkled like stars, reminding her that the world was vast and full of possibilities she had never even considered. For the first time in a long time, she fell asleep feeling like the author of her own story, rather than a supporting character in someone else's narrative. And in the morning, she would begin the work of writing the next chapter entirely on her own terms,